December 22nd, 1944, 0830 hours. 5 kilometers south of Bastogne, Obergefreiter Klaus Hoffmann stands guard at a crossroads that doesn't matter. Fog so thick he can't see past the farmhouse, can't see the road, can barely see his own rifle. 4 days into the Ardennes offensive and everything is proceeding perfectly. The Americans are trapped in Bastogne behind him, cut off. Starving, the fog has grounded their aircraft for 3 straight days. No resupply. No reinforcements, no hope. Hoffmann stamps his feet against the cold and listens to the distant artillery pounding American positions. His Feldwebel said yesterday they might get relieved soon. The siege will end by Christmas, maybe sooner. Then he hears it. Engines, not one, not two, dozens. The sound grows, heavy, mechanical, coming from the south, where intelligence says there are no American forces for at least 50 kilometers. Hoffmann grabs his rifle and peers into the white emptiness. Nothing, just fog and that sound getting louder. His squad leader is shouting into a radio that won't answer. Static, panic in his voice. Then shapes emerge from the mist, metal shapes. Already firing, the entire defensive line dissolves in minutes, and Hoffmann realizes with absolute horror that everything they were told was wrong. December 16th, 1944, Hitler's Ardennes offensive had exploded out of the forests with 3 armies and 200,000 men. Operation Wacht am Rheinwatch on the Rhine. The Führer's last great gamble to split the Allied armies, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. For the first 3 days it worked. American forces reeled backward under the assault. Communications collapsed. Units were surrounded. Bastogne, a critical road junction in Belgium, was encircled by December 20th. The 101st Airborne and elements of the 10th Armored Division were trapped inside with dwindling supplies. German high command was euphoric. The weather was perfect fog and low clouds that grounded Allied air power. American forces were scattered and disorganized. Victory seemed within reach. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, told his staff, "The Americans cannot react quickly enough. Their supply lines are too long. Their command structure is too slow. By the time they organize a response, we will already be across the Meuse." German intelligence confirmed it. The nearest American reserves, Patton's Third Army, were over 150 kilometers south. Engaged in their own offensive toward the Saar, intelligence estimates said it would take Patton at least a week to disengage, reorient his forces, and launch any kind of relief operation. A week. Maybe longer in this weather. The Americans in Bastogne would surrender long before that. German soldiers settling into positions south of the encirclement believed it completely. Why wouldn't they? Every military doctrine said moving an entire army that distance. In winter, through this terrain, was impossible. They had no idea what was. Already in motion, December 19th, 1944, Third Army Headquarters, Nancy, France. General George S. Patton Jr. stared at the map with the intensity of a man possessed. The Ardennes situation was catastrophic. American forces were being pushed back. Bastogne was surrounded. Eisenhower had called an emergency meeting at Verdun. Patton's staff was grim. They'd been fighting toward the Saar for weeks. Their supply lines were stretched. Their divisions were engaged across a broad front. Disengaging and moving north would require a complete operational reorientation. Major General Hobart Gay, Patton's chief of staff, laid out the logistics. "Sir, to turn the entire Third Army 90 degrees and attack north? We're talking about moving 3 divisions over 100 miles in winter. The roads are terrible. The weather is worse. It'll take 3 days, Patton cut him off. We attack on December 22nd. The room went silent. General, the planning alone will take. Then don't plan. Move. Patton's finger stabbed the map. Bastogne is the key. If we lose it, the Germans drive a wedge through our entire front. If we hold it and relieve it, we break their offensive. His staff exchanged glances. What Patton was proposing violated every principle of military logistics. You don't move 133,000 men, 11,000 vehicles, and hundreds of tanks over 100 miles through winter weather in 3 days. Not without extensive preparation. Not without detailed coordination, but Patton had already made up his mind. December 19th evening, Verdun, Eisenhower's emergency conference brought together the Allied High Command. The situation was desperate. The Germans had penetrated deep into Allied lines. Units were scattered. Communications were spotty. Eisenhower asked his commanders, "When can you attack north to relieve Bastogne?" British Field Marshal Montgomery suggested extensive preparation, perhaps late January, when forces could be properly reorganized. American generals talked about logistical challenges, weather considerations, the need for careful planning. Then Eisenhower turned to Patton. "George, when can Third Army attack?" "December 22nd, 3 days." The room erupted. Impossible, reckless, it couldn't be done. German commanders, listening to intercepted radio traffic later, would laugh at the suggestion. American logistics officers protested that the supply requirements alone made it unfeasible. Patton just smiled. "I've already issued movement orders. We'll attack with 3 divisions initially, the 4th Armored, the 26th Infantry, and the 80th Infantry. More will follow." Eisenhower studied Patton carefully, then nodded. "Do it." What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Third Army began moving on December 20th, not in 3 days. Immediately. Patton had anticipated the order and started positioning forces before Eisenhower gave authorization. The 4th Armored Division Patton's spearhead began disengaging from combat operations near the Saar. Maintenance crews worked around the clock preparing vehicles for the march north. Supply officers coordinated fuel and ammunition movements along routes that didn't officially exist yet. The weather was catastrophic. Freezing rain turned roads to ice. Fog reduced visibility to nothing. Convoys moved bumper to bumper through darkness, guided by phosphorescent strips painted on vehicles ahead. Staff Sergeant James Hendricks, 4th Armored Division, recorded in his diary, "We're moving north in the worst weather I've ever seen. Can't see 10 feet. Roads are ice, but we're moving. 24 hours a day, we're moving." The 26th Infantry Division marched through blizzards. Men slept in trucks for 2 hours at a time. Hot food was a luxury. Coffee froze in canteens. Frostbite casualties mounted, but they kept moving. German intelligence tracked none of it. The weather that grounded Allied aircraft also blinded German reconnaissance. The fog that German commanders thought protected them from American response hid the largest operational movement of the war. Patton drove up and down the columns personally, shouting encouragement, cursing traffic jams, demanding speed. Always speed. "Don't stop for anything," he told commanders. "If a truck breaks down, push it off the road and keep moving. If a man can't keep up, leave him and keep moving. Bastogne is running out of time. We attack on the 22nd whether we're ready or not." By December 21st, 3 divisions were in position south of Bastogne. Not perfectly organized, not fully supplied, but there, ready. The impossible had already happened. The Germans just didn't know it yet. December 22nd, 6:00 hours. Attack positions south of Bastogne. The 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A rolled forward into fog so thick tank commanders couldn't see their own lead vehicles. They navigated by compass, by instinct, by dead reckoning through terrain they'd never seen before. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, later said, "We attacked blind, couldn't see anything. Just kept moving north and killed anything that shot at us." German positions south of Bastogne were undermanned. Most German forces were committed to the encirclement or pushing west. The southern approach was supposed to be secure because no American forces could possibly be there. Obergefreiter Klaus Hoffmann and his squad heard the engines first, reported it to company headquarters, were told they were imagining things. That intelligence confirmed no enemy forces in the sector. Then the fog parted for just seconds. Hoffmann saw the road filled with Sherman tanks. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, infantry half-tracks following. The entire column driving north at combat speed. He grabbed the radio. Screamed into it, "Tanks, American tanks approaching from..." The first shells hit before he finished. Artillery fire walking up the road toward his position. Someone firing blind into the fog but getting closer with each salvo. Hoffman's squad scrambled for cover. The stone wall they'd been defending behind collapsed under tank fire. Machine gun positions were crushed by advancing armor before they could engage. The defensive line 4 days of preparation, carefully positioned to contain the Bastogne garrison, shattered in minutes. German Feldwebel Ernst Koch tried to organize resistance. Shouted orders that no one could hear over the roar of engines and explosions. Tried the radio again. Got nothing but static and screaming from other positions reporting the same thing, tanks everywhere, from the south, where they couldn't possibly be. Combat Command A punched through the 1st German defensive line by 0830 hours. Combat Command B followed, widening the breach. The 26th Infantry Division attacked on the right flank. The 80th Infantry on the left. The fog that had protected German forces for 4 days now became their nightmare. They couldn't see to coordinate defenses, couldn't identify targets, couldn't establish coherent resistance. German commanders tried to rush reserves south, but reserves were committed elsewhere. Artillery couldn't fire without observation. Aircraft couldn't fly in zero visibility. The American attack was a knife through butter. December 22nd, afternoon, German positions were collapsing all along the southern sector. Obergefreiter Hoffmann's unit retreated north, then retreated again. They'd abandoned their positions without firing more than a few ineffective shots. Other units reported the same. An entire American army had materialized from nowhere. At German divisional headquarters, staff officers stared at maps in disbelief. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber recorded, "Reports are coming in from all along the southern front." American armor and battalion strength. No, regiment strength. No reports now say division strength. Multiple divisions. This is impossible. Patton's Third Army is still engaged near the Saar, intelligence confirms. Intelligence confirms nothing, his commander shouted. American tanks are driving toward Bastogne and we have nothing to stop them. Field Marshal Model received the first reports at 1000 hours. His reaction was recorded by his aide. Model went pale. Asked if we were certain. Asked how American forces could have moved that quickly. Then said, "Patton, it has to be Patton." No one else would even attempt it. The German High Command had underestimated Patton's audacity. They'd assumed American doctrine and logistics would constrain him. They'd calculated based on what was reasonable, what was possible according to military planning. They'd forgotten that George Patton didn't care what was reasonable. December 26, 1645 hours. The link-up. First Lieutenant Charles Bogus, commanding a platoon of Sherman tanks from the 4th Armored Division, crashed through the final German positions south of Bastogne. His lead tank broke through into the American perimeter. Paratroopers from the 101st Airborne emerged from foxholes. Skeletal, exhausted, but cheering, the siege was broken. 4 days after Patton launched his attack. 6 days after most military experts said it couldn't be done. 10 days after German intelligence said American relief was weeks away. Obergefreiter Klaus Hoffmann watched from a tree line 2 kilometers east. Watched American supply trucks rolling freely into Bastogne. Watched the corridor solidify. Watched the offensive that was supposed to win the war collapse in real time. His Feldwebel Koch sat beside him in silence. Finally spoke. They moved an entire army in 3 days, through winter, through that fog. How? Hoffmann had no answer. German defensive positions that were supposed to hold for weeks evaporated in hours. The southern approach that intelligence said was secure became an American highway. The trapped garrison that was supposed to surrender was now being reinforced. Everything German planning said was impossible had happened anyway. December 27th, German forces began withdrawing from the Ardennes salient. The offensive was over. Not officially fighting would continue for weeks, but strategically it was finished. The relief of Bastogne broke the German timetable. The weather cleared on December 23rd, allowing Allied aircraft to devastate German columns. American reinforcements poured into the breach Patton created. Field Marshal Model reported to Hitler, "The enemy has reacted with unexpected speed. American forces under General Patton have achieved operational movements we assessed as impossible. The southern sector has collapsed. Recommend immediate withdrawal to defensive positions." Hitler refused, ordered continued attacks. But the momentum was gone, the surprise was gone. And German forces, already short on fuel and ammunition, were being systematically destroyed. Obergefreiter Hoffmann's unit withdrew east in early January. They'd started the offensive with 40 men, returned with 16. No tanks destroyed, no glorious victories. Just 4 days of standing guard in fog while their world collapsed around them. Hoffmann wrote in a letter that would never be mailed. "We heard them before we saw them, engines in the fog, we reported it. We're told it was impossible. Then the shapes came through the mist and everything ended. Our officers said American forces couldn't move that fast, said their logistics wouldn't allow it. Said we had days, maybe weeks before they could respond. We had hours, maybe less." He burned the letter. Letters home were censored, no point in spreading despair. Better to let families back in Germany believe the propaganda, believe victory was still possible. But every soldier who'd been south of Bastogne knew the truth, knew what American operational capability looked like, knew that German doctrinal superiority was a myth, knew they were fighting an enemy that could do things military theory said were impossible. The fog lifted, but the truth remained. Patton's relief of Bastogne changed the war's trajectory. The Ardennes offensive was Germany's last major attack in the West. Its failure consumed reserves that could never be replaced. German forces that might have defended the Rhine for months were shattered in weeks. But more than that, Patton's movement proved something fundamental. Proved that aggressive leadership could overcome logistical constraints. That speed and audacity could substitute for perfect planning. That the impossible was only impossible until someone did it anyway. Military historians still study the operation. Moving 133,000 men, 11,000 vehicles, and hundreds of tanks over 100 miles in 3 days during winter remains one of the greatest logistical achievements in military history. German commanders never made the same mistake again. Never assumed American forces couldn't react quickly. Never trusted that weather would prevent American operations. They'd learn it in fog and blood, in collapsed defensive lines that when George Patton decided to move, military doctrine didn't matter, logistics textbooks didn't matter. Weather didn't matter. He moved anyway, and armies followed. Obergefreiter Klaus Hoffmann survived the war. Returned to Germany in 1946, never spoke much about his service. But when asked once about his worst moment, he didn't mention combat or casualties or even the defeat. He mentioned the fog. "We stood there thinking we were safe," he said. "Thinking the weather protected us. Then we heard the engines. Then the shapes came through the mist, and we realized everything we'd been told was a lie. The Americans weren't slow, weren't cautious, weren't constrained by the same rules we followed. They came through impossible conditions. Did things we said couldn't be done, and our entire position collapsed before we fired a dozen shots. That's when I knew we'd lost. Not just the battle, the war, because you can't beat an enemy that refuses to accept impossible." The fog south of Bastogne lifted on December 23, 1944, but for German forces who'd heard Patton's tanks emerge from that fog 3 days earlier, the nightmare never really ended. They'd seen the future. Seen American operational warfare at its finest. Seen what happened when a general looked at the word impossible and attacked anyway. And they knew, all of them, from Model in his headquarters to Hoffmann in his foxhole, that Germany had nothing to counter it. The tanks came out of the fog and everything collapsed. If this deep dive into one of World War II's most stunning operational achievements fascinated you, then you need to subscribe to this channel immediately. We bring you the untold stories from history's greatest conflicts, the impossible victories, the moments when everything changed, the human experiences behind the strategic decisions that shaped our world. These aren't sanitized history lessons. These are the raw, unfiltered accounts of soldiers who witnessed the impossible become real, of commanders who refused to accept constraints, of battles won not through overwhelming force but through sheer audacity. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next video. Because the best stories from military history aren't about following the rules, they're about moments like this, when fog that was supposed to provide protection became a shroud for approaching doom, when tanks emerged from mist that shouldn't have allowed movement, when an entire army did in 3 days what experts said would take 3 weeks, and when German soldiers standing guard in the cold realized that Everything they'd been promised was about to collapse around them,